So the thread I'm going to be using to attach my beads is this 100% silk thread. I think it's usually used in weaving, but I bought it anyway, even though I wasn't going to weave, because I thought I'd find a use for it sometime. And it's not to be confused with this thread. This is just regular sewing thread, which is a lot cheaper and a lot thinner. To show what I mean, if you pull a little bit of thread off the spool, you can see it's a lot thicker than regular sewing thread. And it's nice and strong as well. So for example, if a little bit of pressure, and that's what happens with your sewing thread, and you don't want that to happen to your bracelet. And if you do the same thing to your silk cord, you'll find it's got a lot more strength in it. So next I'm using this metal button, and this is a reclaimed button, and it's very misshapen, which is deliberate as far as I know, and I like the fact that it's quite unusual, but you don't have to use something misshapen, it's just something that I personally liked. If you prefer something a little bit more symmetrical, you could use something like this. You see that's a lot flatter than the other one. It's got some kind of coat of arms on it as well, but you don't have to have that. You could also get something like these. One's got concentric circles, but one's just flat and plain. What you do want to look out for is that you've got a big enough space to put your cord through, because it won't squash. Taking your button and your cord, you want to feed the cord through the buttonhole. This can be a little bit of a tight fit, but this one does go in mine. You want to carefully pull that through because you don't want to scrape the leather, and then match the ends up to find the centre. And just gently ease your button to the centre of the cord. And then you can gently pinch the leather together. Now that should keep its shape as you're making the bracelet. So taking your board, you want to clip the button to the top of your board. And then taking your tail ends, you want to clip those to the other end. And next take your thread and put it underneath the two cords. So one end wants to be about a foot long, and then the rest of it at the other side. And then go over, over and through. And then pull it close, but it won't stay close straight away. And then do the other half of your square knot by going under, and then under and through again. And now it'll allow you to tighten it up a little bit. And then you can push that knot as close to the button as you want it to be. And you don't have to worry about tightening too much here, because as you go along it will get tighter. So then you're just repeating those steps to make as many square knots as you want. Now obviously you don't have to do square knots to attach the thread on, a lot of people don't. I just like the extra detail that it gives, especially because there's a really nice colour to this thread. But you can just tie it to the button. So once you're satisfied that you've done enough square knots, you're going to end up with a straight tail end here. Normally with nylon I'd seal it with a lighter, but obviously with this you can't. So instead, to deal with the tail end, I take the shortest end and thread it into a sewing needle. And with that done, you can remove the top of the bracelet from the board. And here you want to sew it in to the square knots, just by putting the needle underneath along the groove formed by the two holding cords, and then just thread your cord through. And I run this through a couple of times just to make sure it's nice and secure. And going back, you want to make sure you go over at least one of the knots. So you don't want to just run it straight back through, otherwise you're just taking it back out again. So you want to just skip one and then run it through. And this will hold the thread in place. I'm not sure if this is showing up right on the camera, but every time I basically just move back over one of the knots so it keeps it in place. And I do this quite a few times because I like to make sure it's definitely secure, but you don't have to do it as many as I have. Just make sure you always skip one of the threads when you're running it back through so it'll secure it in place. And once you're happy that it's nice and secure, you can just snip the end off, and that should stay in place. And you should end up with something that looks like this. And then you can reattach your button to the top of your board. Taking your remaining thread, you want to thread it through your needle again. And then I work under the first cord and then through the centre. And then repeat this. I do this once wrapped round before I put the first bead on. I just find it gives a better finish. And then you can thread through the bead. Then you want to work over and through the centre of your cords with the needle. And once you've done this, you want to re-thread through the bead, and carefully hold in the thread that's already in there, because you don't want to thread through that, because that does cause your work to catch. And once you've done this, carefully ease your bead into place, and it wants to sit in between the cords. It's worth taking a little bit of time to make sure that it's nice and neat and flush against the top. And once you're happy it's in place, you can repeat the process to add your second bead. Remembering to keep your thread held tight while you're holding the bead, because it is really easy to thread through with the needle and catch the thread. And that basically stops you from being able to push your bead down. And then going through again, adding your next bead. And you're just going to repeat this pattern until you've got the bracelet as long as you want it. And after you've added a few of your beads, your bracelets should be starting to look something like this. Once you've got the bracelet as long as you want it, you're going to want to fasten off the ends. Now obviously you've got one side, but the other side isn't there this time, so I'm going to use hitch knots to close this one. And I'm keeping the needle on just because I want to once again thread it at the end, and I don't want to have to put the needle back on. So you can match up the amount of hitch knots to the amount of square knots you did at the beginning if you wish. And once you're satisfied that it's nice and secure, you can remove it from the board. Now you want to copy what you did in the first steps and secure your thread by sewing it. So going through the centre, run along the groove that's created by your holding cords. You just run the thread through to keep it in place. And then skip one of the knots and thread it back through. This is just to hold it in place. And do this as many or as few times as you feel is necessary to keep your bracelet secure. I do quite a few here, but again, I do go a bit overboard, but I'm just paranoid about it staying secure. Once you're satisfied that it's nice and secure, you can trim the excess off. So next you want to neaten up any stray parts. Sometimes the beads can adjust as you're making it. And then you want to fasten off the ends by making a knot. And then taking your button, you want to measure out how much space you'll need before your next knot. And then pull your knot fairly tight, but not too tight, just in case it doesn't fit, and just check that it does fit through. And then you can tighten it up as necessary. And so I'm going to add another knot to the end of this one to make it adjustable. This is just to show how you would make it if you weren't sure of the size of the wrist for the person you're making it for, say if it was a gift or something. So you can make it like this so it'll be adjustable, and then the person who gets it, if necessary, can just trim off the second knot. Now check that your button fits through both of the knots, or both of the gaps, sorry. So once you're happy with the sizing, you can trim off the stray ends. So once you've done that, you're going to end up with something that looks like this. So now you just want to try on your bracelet. And that is your completed leather beaded bracelet.